Welcome to the Happy Being Well podcast, where we talk about strategies and insights so you can live happy being well with your host, Rita Farruggia. This podcast is presented by happybeingwell.com, your online store providing the best in all natural wellness products, such as natural essential oils, all natural bath products, all natural facial masks, all natural deodorants, irresistible leggings, crystals, including crystal home decor and kitchen items, herbal teas, natural sleep aids, and so much more natural wellness goodies at happybeingwell.com. Free shipping on any order within the USA at happybeingwell.com. Now enjoy the show.
Hey, welcome back to the Happy Being Well podcast. You're about to listen to an interview between me and the mother of my ex-deceased fiance, Maria. So I reviewing the audio recording back. I'm a little bit emotional, so keep that in mind when I'm discussing Shannon, aka Rocky. This interview is real, it's raw, it's a perspective from a mother who has lived with a son battling bipolar and depression issues, managing that while loving her son unconditionally, sharing her experiences. And then from my experience as the girlfriend at the time slash fiance, my experiences of living with somebody that you love deeply with bipolar depression, mental health issues, and trying to navigate around that. So this interview is real, it's raw, and if you know anybody that is experiencing mental health issues or having a loved one, you know, navigating around a loved one's mental health issues, definitely an interview you definitely want to listen to and share it with friends and family. So enjoy the interview. Computer. Hi, guys. Welcome to another episode of Happy Being Well. And we have an interesting episode today. Today's episode is real, it's raw, it's a conversation that so many people need, but none of us are having. I have my ex-deceased fiance with me on this podcast. She's our guest today. And why is because we both loved him dearly, and we decided to discuss about how he navigated around his mental health challenges. And he had bipolar and depression. And so he's no longer with us. But we decided to share, our experiences and insights into how to navigate a love within the loved one who is going through this, and also snippets of what, you know, what Maria, his mother, um, would experience with him as he was going through these challenges, because as we know, sometimes when they're in the rut of it, they're in the rut of it, and then when they pull out of it, they have moments of clarity. And I will share some of my moments of clarity that he had, looking when he would look back on his behavior in hindsight. She is deeply spiritual, she's incredibly wise, and she's also a mother who has lived through one of the hardest experiences imaginable, the loss of her son, Shannon, also known as Rocky. So, Rocky is what his family referred to him and some of his friends referred to him. That was his nickname. And both Maria and I loved Shannon, aka Rocky, deeply. And behind who he was to the world, he was also navigating, bipolar and depression, like I mentioned earlier, substance abuse, struggles that impacted his relationships, his life, and ultimately changed all of ours. This conversation is not about blame. It's not about trying to rewrite the past. It's about truth. It's about understanding what it means to love someone through their pain, how to set boundaries when things become unhealthy, and how to find peace, healing, and growth after loss. So, Maria, welcome to the Happy Being Well podcast. I'm so excited to have you on the show. And we're going to talk about this really important topic that a lot of people are, experiencing with loved ones, you know. So, you can introduce yourself to the Happy Being Well audience and also, like, what would you describe who Shannon was at his core before we start going into um, how to navigate around some of his mental health challenges, how difficult that was. Um, yeah, so you can share with
Okay.
us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. I feel very blessed that you even asked me. I'm in South Florida, and it's approximately 12:15 in the afternoon on Wednesday. And this is a story that I know many, many, many families have gone through or are going through. And it's a sad state of what's going on with the young people today with the drugs and alcoholism and everything. So I'm very, very happy to share my story with Rita's listeners. And so I'll just give you a brief synopsis of who I am. I was born in 1943 in New Jersey, and I moved down to South Florida in 1970. So I've been here like 56 years. I consider myself a Floridian, and like I tell my surviving children, this is where I live and this is where I'm going to die. And Florida is home. So we're talking about my fifth child, Rocky, my golden child, who was very spoiled. We were upper middle class. At 7 years old, he had his own bass boat. I had horses for my children and lived in a beautiful big home with a swimming pool. And my children all went to private Christian schools, and we were in church 3 times a week: Wednesday night, Sunday night, and Sunday morning. Even though I was born and raised a Catholic, Italian Catholic at that, I got born again in 1982, and that's exactly what changed my life forever. So here I am today on this podcast. Never been on a podcast before. Um, and technology, forget about it. With me, I don't have a computer and I don't have a smartphone. So my life is very simple and easy. And so when Rita asked me to would I be a guest on her podcast, I didn't know. I knew what podcasts were, but I didn't know how to do it because I have no computer or any of those technology skills. Any talents that I have and had were all God given. So I'm ready to share my heartbreak, my love, my life with your listeners. So go ahead, Rita.
Yeah, sure. So, it like we mentioned, when we're kind of prepping for the podcast, how, to give people kind of an understanding, because I remember, everybody would would hear the stories, anybody that has a loved one with bipolar and also has depression as well, with their episodes and such. And you just heard Maria say that she spoiled Shannon. So on top of that, he was a man that was used to getting what he wanted. Um, he was very good looking. I am sharing with the audience, those of you who are listening in on Spotify, you get to see the visuals of I have a little rotating pictures of Shannon and me and Shannon together, and just Shannon, and also of beautiful Maria, and you'll see pictures of his mother. And he was very handsome. He was very charming. He just had a captivating presence to him. A lot of people, when they first met him, reminded him of Tony Robbins in terms of just his ability to connect with people, make them feel like they've known him forever, and make them feel at ease and comfortable. And he had a way of making them feel special and seen and heard. And that was just a remarkable skill set that he had that he carried over to his sales career. And that's what always made him, a top-notch sales producer in whatever industry that he was in. So, that being said, somebody like that, they're on top of the mental health struggles that they have, when you're in a relationship with them, it just I would say in my experience, it just kind of can add sometimes to tension or conflict because Shannon would just never back down on terms of like if this is what he wanted or whatever, even though it could be ridiculous and most of the time he get what he wanted, but then sometimes when it was just beyond ridiculous and so it just created more relationship conflicts at times. Um, and so I remember, I think when I was embarking on my personal development and journey in terms in the early days, like I would say in 2011, that was a part of why I really was going into these more in workshops. I remember studying neurolinguistic programming. And I would go and keep advancing into like all the way to teachers training. Because a part of it was like, oh, I could help Shannon or I could use these skills to like communicate with Shannon because, all these, and um, so that was a little bit of, you know, my kind of snippet of ways of trying to navigate around Shannon. But like I said before, I started learning the technology of and neurolinguistic programming, but when I would start using it on Shannon, Shannon would always just giggle. He knew exactly what I was doing, and then or sometime one time he would say he's like, "Oh, I'm healed. You've healed me. You've healed me, Rita." He would just make jokes about it. So, um, he was incredibly self-aware. The reason why I'm saying it was difficult because no matter what I did, like it really wasn't, there was nothing that was long lasting or I could do to like, I guess heal him or like make him, change or whatever. Cause he was just going to go through what he was going to go through, sabotage and have these quote episodes, and I remember just hitting a point of just like, okay, there's nothing. I just remember thinking there's just nothing. I mean, we'd had moments of clarity with him where I would make jokes and like, and he would laugh. He definitely was he exactly knew, um, the, the challenging behaviors he would oppose upon, people that were close to him. Um, Whenever there was moments of conversation in terms of in a joking manner or whatever. Um, but, um, but, he just, I guess he just, I don't know. I guess he couldn't control it. Obviously it's a disorder. So, we need to be medicated and that was a whole nother issue too. So can you share with me as a mother some of the things that maybe you've tried to do to help him, control like try to like better manage the bipolar?
Okay, well, I can tell you this, nothing works unless he's delivered by God. Nothing works because I was left with five, excuse me, I was left with five children to raise. I work 6 days a week and to keep the roof over our heads. And I was a very strict mother. My idea of raising a child was it's my way or the highway, and I kept them in line. But then there comes a time when they grow up. And Shannon grew up. He went to Christian schools, and his teachers loved him. He was so cute, and just personality. And if he did wrong in school, it turned out that the teachers would laugh because he would con them. And they would tell me the stories about him. And so as the time went on, he joined the Army, not because I insisted on it. I wanted him in college, but his father signed him into the Army. And he spent 3 years in the Army, and he would be getting into trouble in the Army and be calling me for $5,000 for a lawyer. And I said, no, I'm not giving you anything. So he finally got released, and he called me and he said, Mom, can I come home? And I said, yes, you can come home, but you know what the house rules are, you have to obey. And he did wonderful when he came home. And then a coworker of mine, her son was a big stockbroker in Fort Lauderdale. And she said to me, Maria, does Rocky have a job yet? I said, no, he just got home from the Army and he's looking for a job. She said, well, he could work the phones for my son at his brokerage firm in Fort Lauderdale. And he said the pay is only $5 an hour, but it's a phone job, and he can learn the ins and outs of being a stockbroker. And I said, great. So Rocky really liked that idea, and every day he went to Fort Lauderdale, and he worked. And then finally, he wanted to be a stockbroker himself. So every night, after he worked for this brokerage firm during the day on the phones, every night he would study. And I wouldn't allow no music, no radio, no TV on. I would sit in my living room and read the Bible with the lamp on. And he would be at the table. And he would go, I can't do this. It's too hard. I can't do it. And I said to him, Rocky, winners don't quit and quitters don't win. You were born to be a leader. You finish your homework tonight. And sure enough, he did. And miraculously, the first time, which is the second hardest test to take in the United States, your broker's license, he passed. And I was so happy, and he was so happy. He worked for a very prestigious brokerage firm in Fort Lauderdale. He was very well liked because I'm 5'0" and 100 pounds. And here I have this Rocky, 6'2", about 200 pounds. And I would always say to him, what happened to my little boy? Where's my little boy? I don't know who you are. And I used to threaten to get a DNA test because, you know, such a big, handsome, movie star looks this guy had. So he passed, and the brokerage firm gave him a party, and they were happy. And then Rocky was kicking butt. He had a Mercedes convertible. He was making money hand over fist, living the high life. And then Rocky became a follower with some of the guys from the brokerage firm who befriended him because he had charisma, he had personality, he had skills and sales ability like you can't believe, which are God-given talents. So they decided to leave that firm and start their own firm. And Rocky followed against my advice. And what happened was everyone that he left with that coerced him into going into their own firm, they all got caught with fraud with the I think it's the SEC, Security Exchange in Washington, D.C., and they all lost their broker's license. That's when the spirit of my son broke. That was the end of the line for him. And his main concern was that his mother was very disappointed in him. And that's when his depression set in. And I was there to help him along and tell him it's not the end of the world. It's a big, wide world out there. And you just have to navigate this, learn your lesson, and move on. And I advised him to go to, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. I advised him to go to real estate school, and he did. And he would go to Boca Raton, which is in Palm Beach, 5 days a week, and go to real estate school. He passed all the tests with flying colors. And I told him that he needs to sell the high-end real estate in Palm Beach, on the ocean, on the intercoastal. That's where the money is. And he's got the gift of gab, so it's perfect for him. And he passed his real estate test, flying colors. And then when Tallahassee or Jacksonville, one or the other, I think it was Tallahassee, got all his paperwork, they checked his background with the fiasco of the fraud for the stock brokerage firm that him and his friend started. They would not give him a license. That was his second blow. And that's when the bizarre behavior, and then him and all those guys, they would be going to South Beach, drinking, drugging, women, just a horrible life. And I would say to him, Rocky, you're going down the wrong path. God has had his hand on you since you're 7 years old. You're running from God. Until you get right with God, nothing in your life is going to go right. And I was proved right. And Rocky had a son out of wedlock, let's put it this way, a one-night stand, and she got pregnant. They took the DNA testing, and I think he told me, now this is what he told me, I don't know it for a fact, that there were him and 3 other guys giving blood to see who is the father of this baby. And it happened to be Rocky. Rocky didn't want to be a father. He wasn't ready to be a father. He had no job security. And this baby was born, and I didn't know about it till this baby was a year old. When he showed me a picture of this baby, him and his current girlfriend, her name was Lindsay, came to my home one day and said, look at this kid. And I looked and I said, oh, he's cute. Who is he? And then Rocky said, he's my son. You could have floored me because I never knew I had a grandchild out there, and he never shared it with me. He was ashamed and embarrassed. And I questioned him relentlessly. Who's the mother? Where do they live? Who's the baby? He lied about their background to me because he didn't want me to get my Sherlock Holmes hat on, and he knows I'm a great detective and check things out. So after searching all of Broward County, which I live in Palm Beach County, he finally told me her name and the name of the baby, and he gave me her phone number. And I called her. I told her who I was, and I said, I want to see my grandson. And when he was 1 year old was the first time I met my grandson. I told Rocky, you cannot be like your father and be no father. I said, because this is your son, you put him on this earth, and you need to step up to the plate like a man. I will, Mom, I will. Unfortunately, Rocky never did. The few times he interacted with Tyler, it wasn't very pleasant. He tried, but he didn't have the capabilities or the desire. I told him these words exactly many, many times. Rocky, if you don't step up to the plate and be a father to your son, nothing in your life is going to go right. And that was prophetic, because that's exactly what happened. But the day I met my grandson, I was his grandmother. And he's like 23 years old today, and I'm his grandmother. And we have a very close relationship, and I consider Tyler's mother, my daughter-in-law, and her family as my in-laws. And so that part went right. but he grew up without a father. And Rocky couldn't be a father because of his drug abuse. And let me just backtrack and mention this. Mental illness is not just something that comes on you from nowhere. On his father's side, his grandmother on his father's side, they're from North Carolina, they were, the grandmother was a mental patient. She was committed minimum 3 times to a mental institution. So it's in the bloodline of that side of the family. And Rocky's father, and this tells you about me also, before I knew the Lord. I tell everyone I married Satan. I absolutely married Satan. When I married him, I came down from New Jersey after being divorced. I married him with 3 children. And next thing you know, I have 2 more children, a total of 5. Rocky's father made our life a living hell on this earth. He was finally arrested after hundreds of calls to the Hollywood police and the Coral Springs, Florida police, hundreds of complaints about his abuse with my first 3 children and myself. Finally went to court, and he was sentenced to 15 years in state prison, and it's all common knowledge and paperwork at the Broward County Courthouse. Sentenced to 15 years by a wonderful female judge who said, I am going to make an example of you. This is what happens when you want to beat on your wife and your children, your stepchildren. And so it was hard to navigate, even though at that time I was the breadwinner. And I thank God for the job. And I thank God that only God got me through, where I was able to support my 5 children, myself, and my widowed mother, and took care of everybody's needs. So fast track, mental illness comes down in the bloodline, and it was all on the paternal side. And so when you drink, the old adage is there's a devil in the bottle for alcoholics. There is, because some alcoholics get happy and jolly and they're a good time. Other times alcoholics get mean as rattlesnakes. Mean. And there's a devil in the bottle. The same thing when you open up your life to drugs and drug abuse. The minute you do that, the devil comes in and completely overruns your life. And the demon's name over drug abuse is pharmacia. That's where you get the word pharmacy from, the demon of pharmacia. And the minute you start, no matter how small, with marijuana or anything, it's never enough, never enough. And I want your viewers to know this. Satan has one job on this earth. He comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy. And Satan never sleeps. And he does his job well, as you can see, by the drug overdose deaths and the homeless people due to alcoholism and drug addiction. And this is how he destroys. And every year it's getting younger and younger. Pretty soon, a whole generation is going to be gone because of the liberal people in Washington, D.C. By the way, I am as conservative as can be. And I don't affiliate myself with being one party or another. I'm a patriot, and I follow the Bible, and I vote with who represents the Bible the most. So Rocky got into this drugs down in South Beach, and because he looked like a movie star, he had all these girls from South America, model girls, and the high life, and big condos on the ocean in Miami Beach, just living good. And where was little Maria? Praying for God to save him and put a hook in his jaw and reel him back in. So that didn't help. And then Rocky lost everything, and he moved in with me. And I was as kind and patient and loving as a mother could be on one hand. On the other hand, I was strict. Told him, if you do or bring any illegal drugs into my house, my finger is on 911. And many times I called 911 to have him evicted and arrested. And of course, the answer is, as long as he gets mail here, you have to go to court to have him evicted. Honestly, in my heart, I didn't want to do that because he was sick, mentally and physically sick. And I knew if he went out on the street, he'd be dead in the streets of Pompano Beach, Florida. So I told him, as long as you behave, you're allowed to stay here. And that worked. But again, when he finally left and got his own apartment, and he would come back, and especially on Sundays with my big Italian dinners after church, and then he would drink this GHB, and he would pass out. And one particular Sunday, he was sitting on my living room floor, and I had ziti and meatballs and sausage and his favorite dinner, and he fell forward, and his face went right into the dish. I called the paramedics. They came. They took his blood pressure, which was sky high, and they said, we're going to take you in the paramedics truck to the hospital. He said, no, I'm fine. They said, do you realize your blood pressure is so high you can have a stroke or a heart attack? But Florida law, he's an adult. You can't take a person against their will to the hospital. And no matter what I said or did, he wasn't going with them. And so I finally put him in one of the bedrooms where he slept. And it got to be, whenever he was in his bedroom and I'd be in the living room, not being able to sleep because every 15 minutes I listened to the bedroom door to make sure he was breathing. And did it take a toll on me? Emotionally, it did, because my son was chosen by God at the age of 7. He had everything going for him, the golden boy, personality, talent, charisma, just everything. He could talk Eskimos into buying ice cubes. And I saw all that talent wasted because he couldn't get it together. So not only did he do street drugs, but he went to the VA because he was a veteran. He served 3 years in Heidelberg, Germany. And his position was so highly secretive that the CIA and the FBI were trying to recruit him to go to Washington, D.C. to work for the government in one of their agencies. And how I found out is one day I come home from work and my neighbor said, Maria, do you know the government was here looking for you? And I said, why? I couldn't understand it. And so I go into my home and I said, Rocky, who was the government here for today? He said, because they want me to work at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. They're offering me this job, and they have to check you out and my family out. They never checked the father in North Carolina, thank God, but they checked me and my mom and my 4 other children to know that we were upstanding citizens and pristine records, never in trouble. And so I said to him, Rocky, this is a chance of a lifetime. Only God knows what you can do in Washington to change things. Rocky never went. Was I disappointed? You bet I was, because God was opening that door for bigger and better things than he can ever hope for down here in South Florida. So that was another letdown. So to move on, and I'm putting this all in the Reader's Digest version because it's so much. So I finally convinced him, you have to move out. You've got to get on your feet as a man. You have to move out. You can't be living with me forever. You need to get out and take charge of yourself. I finally convinced him to do that, and through the VA, they got him his own apartment down in Hollywood. And when he told me where it was, I said, Rocky, that's not a very good neighborhood, because when we moved from New Jersey, we moved to Hollywood, Florida. That was my first place I came down to with my parents and 3 children. And in my spirit, red flags went up. And I heard the Holy Spirit say this: where it all began is where it's going to end. And I knew in my heart something was going to happen. And thank God you get these red flags in your spirit from the Holy Spirit. And so I said, Rocky, I don't like you living in Hollywood, because that's where I met his father shortly after I moved down here. I said, please come further north and come west, where this is where we've been living, Coral Springs. Come. And he said, no, I have to stay here because this is where the VA, found an apartment for me. And so there was nothing more I can do about it. So he would call me up every day, several times, every night. And whenever I started speaking about God, Rocky cut me off real quick, because he was under conviction. He knew that he wasn't supposed to be doing the things that he was, but he couldn't stop and he couldn't help himself. So finally, my last phone call with my son, he was crying hysterical. And I said, Rocky, what's wrong? What's wrong? He said, I'm depressed. I'm depressed. I'm depressed. I said, Rocky, and then I reminded him about what God did to him when he was 7 years old. And I got my preaching on. And this time, Rocky didn't stop me. So I kept going. I said, Rocky, God has had his hand on you since you're 7 years old, when he took you on a trip to heaven. And I said, and I remember every word that you said to me at 3 o'clock in the morning when you ran into my bedroom, shaking from head to toe and saying, Mommy, Mommy, can I get in bed with you? I said, Rocky, what's wrong? He said, Mommy, Mommy, I just went to heaven. And that'll be for another podcast, that whole situation. I reminded Rocky of that. And I said, nothing's working out for you, Rocky. I said, because you allowed Satan to take over your life with drugs. I said, and that opens the door to mental problems and everything else that's wrong in your life. I said, and I was preaching more to him, but very calm and gently. And so I said, Rocky, he goes, I got to go. I got to take a shower. I said, Rocky, I said, when you're in that shower, you ask God to forgive you of all your sins, and that when you die, you want to go to heaven and be with Jesus. I said, and then make a deal with God. I said, you ask God to deliver you from all your habits, whether they be alcohol, drugs, or whatever, and ask God to forgive you, and you need his help to deliver you, and when he does, you will serve God the rest of your life. And he goes, in between his tears, okay, Mom, okay, I love you, I'll call you tomorrow. And I said, okay, Rocky, Mommy loves you. And I hung up. That night, Rocky goes in the shower, and God showed me this. Rocky goes in the shower. He asked God to forgive him. He gave his heart to the Lord. And he made a deal with God. Then he went to bed. And he died. And that was on a Friday night. He was supposed to come on Saturday to pick up his new cell phone. I called him, no answer. And then Sunday, I get a call from a girl who's been friends with Rocky since kindergarten. And she said, Maria, have you heard from Rocky? I said, no. I said, I'm getting ready for church. Why? What's up? And she said, I spoke to him 2 nights ago, and he said he took a half of fentanyl, but he wasn't sure, but he didn't feel right. I said, what? And I said to her, why didn't you call me? She said, well, I didn't want to make trouble for him. I said, are you kidding me? I would have called the Hollywood police immediately. So I call Rocky's cell number, he doesn't answer. I call the Hollywood police. I want to well check on my son. Meanwhile, I already knew what happened. And the Hollywood police went to the house, and they said, oh no, his dog is in there. His pickup truck is parked in the front, and we don't see flies or we don't smell anything. I said, are you kidding me? I said, either you get in that house, I said, find the superintendent, break the door down, I'll pay for the door, get in that house and find out what's going on, or I'm coming down and I'm going to put my car through the front door. They said, wait a minute, let's call our sergeant. They called the sergeant at the Hollywood police, and sure enough, he gave them permission to enter with the superintendent, and they found my son there. Definite overdose, fentanyl overdose, with the blood and the foam coming out of his mouth. And so they called me and told me, we usually come to your home, but you're a half hour north of us, come to your home to deliver this news, but your son is deceased. And it's never good to hear that, but when you have God, he gives you peace that surpasses all understanding, and the joy of the Lord is your strength. I knew where my son was. His struggles on this earth were over with. They were done. No more. No more Satan tempting him and using him. That he was in the presence of God the Father and the King of Kings, Jesus. And I went through the funeral and everything, and people said, how did you do it? How do you do it? And you keep standing. I said, when you have God, all things are possible. I know where my son is. My son is in heaven. That's the only thing that matters to me as a mother, because my Bible says if you're saved, he will save your whole family. And I reminded God of that. And then that's when God showed me the vision. And so I have peace knowing his struggles on this earth are over with. And there'll be a big reunion one day with my whole family up there in heaven. And that's how I cope with it. And I'm a realist. And I know the Word of God. And God sustains me. And so there's much, much more I can say. But I'll turn it over to Miss Rita, who I got to meet because she was my son's fiance. And lovely woman, madly in love with my son. And that's another thing I'll say. My son had 3 beautiful girlfriends. Lindsley, Mary Soul, and Stephanie. They all loved him beyond measure. They all put up with him, and they all tried to do the best for him, and nothing worked. Nothing, because he didn't ask God to help him. Nothing worked. And then comes along Rita. Same thing. No matter what he did or said to her, as women, we want to fix things. And that's a big signal for you young girls, if you're listening. You can't change anybody, because our mentality is we'll marry them and we'll change them. You marry them and they'll change, but for the worse, not for better. And remember, Satan always sends the counterfeit first before he sends the real deal. So my hats are off to these 4 awesome women who loved him unconditionally and put up with him And they absolutely loved me, these ladies, because they saw what a great mom I am, and that I always tried to help him. And they all said the same thing. Rocky really loved his mother, really loves his mother. And when Rocky was good, he put his big arm around me, and my head would fit right under the crook of his arm, and goes, "You know you love me, Mom. You know you love me. I'm your Rocky." And that's when I would always say and look up at him at 6'2", and I'm 5'0". I don't know who you are. I don't know who you are, but when I get a DNA test, I'm going to sue you for $1 million for child support. And he would laugh. And when he was good, he was the best. When he was bad, he was the worst. So that was just a brief synopsis of my son, but there was so much more to him. And I'm sure if Miss Rita invites me back on her podcast, we'll go into much more. So go ahead, Rita.
Yeah, I'm definitely inviting you back on the podcast, Maria. So you brought up, okay, well, first I'm going to bring up, she's mentioned Rocky's, Shannon's ex-girlfriends. We were not girlfriends at the same time. So we were girlfriends at different phases of his life. So just to be clear with the audience, he wasn't
Yes,
like, what do you call those people?
yes,
Anyways, so yeah, he
yes,
had one girlfriend at a time, like one serious girlfriend at a time.
yes,
So you mentioned two things I wanted to kind of bring up. That's one is very common with people that have mental health struggles, bipolar. It's sabotage. You mentioned he would sabotage like he would decline opportunities in life. Um,
yes.
so I saw that you mentioned one declining a position, um, high position
The
within
Pentagon.
the government, and
Yeah,
he's done that like all throughout really his life. That's one example among many. While him and I were dating, he's declined high profile opportunities with casting directors. And so, it's so many, it's just because he was such a talented, vibrant, charismatic person. My baby needs a bottle, so I'm just going to quickly give him a bottle. And oh, I know, Nicholas. Okay, yeah, I know. I'm going to get your bottle, open up a bottle. So, and also what Miri mentioned as well, when he was good, he was good. When he was bad, he was bad. So with Shannon, he had like a split personality where, and he had like hold on, I just here, Nicholas.
while you're
Here,
taking care of that, may I make 2 comments?
yeah, sure.
Okay. Shannon, as all his women called him, Shannon, and I call him Rocky, was his own worst enemy. Whenever he lost all his, what do you call it, drive in himself, and never felt that he was good enough for anything else. But, and so that's why he didn't want to try anything, because it was the rejection, because he could not handle rejection. And it was such a waste of talent. And, um, and I used to say to him, Rocky, you've got so much to offer the world, and God's got his hand on you, Rocky. So let's get going. And then I would always say to him, stop bringing all these girlfriends to my house. It's like a revolving door. And there were models from South America uh, that did I like? No, absolutely not. But he brought him over to introduce them to me, and I saw right through them. He was, like we said, good looking, had money, and they latched on to him. And so I used to tell him, I want you to get married, move to Hawaii, and have 6 kids and leave me alone. And he used to laugh. And unfortunately, he didn't take my advice. So I just wanted to mention that. Okay, go ahead, Rita.
Yeah, so yeah, no, I mean he had a split personality, which is the one side was he was at times very, really concerned and loving and nice to people in a genuine manner. It wasn't at a like there were just like, just so many examples I've seen throughout our relationship where it wasn't about doing it out of some kind of motive to get some kind of reciprocity, like in terms of connections or resources out of somebody. No, it was just like if people needed a ride somewhere and they didn't have a car, throughout his neighborhood, he would go and drive them to the grocery store. I'm going to emphasize the word at times. He wasn't always like this. That's why I mentioned split personality, but he had a component to his personality at times where this would appear and show up, where he would be, really go above and beyond to really help people, whether that's making a stranger smile that maybe a cashier or something that he thinks is overstressed or something. Um, or just another example would be, an elderly lady, a neighbor that needed help moving furniture. He would help her move the furniture. And so stuff like that. So he would at times, but then there was another component to him at times that, if you were in a close relationship with him, I think his romantic relationships probably got it the worst. He would like kind of psychologically torture you at times, um, through making you by creating tension in the relationship, by making you feel uncomfortable or whatever. Like he kind of like had an addiction to that, and I think that's a part of the bipolar. And so you had this dynamic where, you fell in love with his absolute remarkable, brilliant, good side. Um, and I definitely fell in love with that side. I mean, as I'm sure with all his other ex-girlfriends did as well. Because it was a side that just really was refreshing to experience out of a person, that you don't really get to experience that. Unfortunately with the average, it's just rare. Um, I remember like I think it was like I don't know, I think our second date. Um, yeah, it was our second date. And so we went to Benihana's and the and then it was in Miami. And so the wait staff, they have the wait staff, the cooks and the chef, as everybody knows that has been there, they cook in front of you or they do like little performance with the food. And he was the only one at the table that was like clapping and applauding the person and making the person feel good. And then he whispered to me, it's a shame that nobody shows appreciation and da 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 da. Everyone takes that for granted and stuff like that. So that's probably one of the moments where I started falling in love with him was because he would showcase this remarkable side to him that really just touched humanity at times.
May I interject?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Rocky was in a battle practically his whole adult life. Good versus evil. He knew how he was raised up by a Christian godly mother, and yet he was living this other lifestyle, but he knew that I was a no nonsense mother. And I used to tell him, "You don't scare me. I only fear one person, and that's Jesus. You don't scare me, so don't pull your shenanigans on me." And he would laugh because he used to say, "I'm only afraid of one person, and that's my mother." And his friends would say, "What, that little woman?" And he would say, "Yeah, because she's got the capability of putting me in jail." So he had that fear in him. And another thing that I think is very important, so many mothers, their sons could be serial killers, and they would stand in the court and tell the judge, oh, what a good son, this and that. And no, not me. You're either good or you're evil. And when his girlfriends, the four of them at like Rita said, at different times, when they would tell me what they were doing and going through, I would stand up for the women. And he used to get mad at me. I'm your son. You need to stick up for me. I said, you're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. And I'm standing up for these innocent, poor victims of you. This is when he was really getting bad with the crack and everything else. So I just wanted to stress that I don't cover up for any of my children. And I go by what the Bible says about this. If there is evil and you know about it and you do nothing about it, you are just as evil. And when I die and I meet Jesus, I don't want any blood on my hand. I want to stand before him, and I know I always did the right thing. And these four spectacular women today know that I was their greatest advocate, but because when he was wrong, he was wrong. And they knew that I was their advocate for them. So that's why I can't understand all these mothers that lie about how great their sons are and they're murderers. No, not me. And Rocky knew that. That was the fear he had of me. He should have feared God, not me. Go ahead, Rita.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, unfortunately, Shannon had a drug addiction that he, used to combat his bipolar. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and depression. Um, and
Wait, I
so
just want to interject one more thing about that. Going to the VA, they would send to my home pill bottles after pill bottles after pill bottles, not knowing what he was already taking, and he would just pop them like they were M&Ms. Pop them, not reading the labels, and believe whatever came from the VA was going to heal him and cure him. I used to tell him, common sense tells you, Rocky, these are pharmaceuticals. You got to read the directions, and you got to let whatever doctor prescribe these at the VA to see if they're interacting with each other to make your condition worse or poison you. Because living in South Florida, the land of senior citizens down here, their doctors give them 8-10 pills, and because they believe in their doctors, they're swallowing all these, and many senior citizens die from a drug reaction because these pills mixed together don't help you, they kill you. Okay, go ahead, Rita.
yeah. So that being said, did you notice any signs of his mental illness while he was growing up, or did they all of a sudden become much more evident in his adulthood while he's
Oh,
going?
no, nothing growing up, nothing. He was just a normal boy and riding his bicycle around the neighborhood. And he wanted a big, giant raft so he could put it in the canal. I told him, you don't do that. Put it in the canal. You put it in our pool, not in the canal. And one day, I come home from work and my girls are going, Mommy, Rocky put the raft in the canal. Now there's alligators in the canal, the grace of God. And so he finally put the raft up on the bank, and then he pulled it towards our house. And I went in, I got a knife and let the air out of the canal and ripped the plastic. That was the end of that. Because you have to listen. I don't make rules because I have nothing better to do or they're fun. No, I make rules to keep you safe. Because when I stand before God, I have to answer for you. And I am not going to hell because of your disobedience. So anyhow, and then uh, one of my daughters, my fourth child, Rocky's biological sister, was an equestrian. So what did I do? I rented 5 acres on a farm in the town, Parkland, next to my town, and I bought Kimberly a horse. And I bought Rocky a bass boat, $25,000 bass boat. He was about 8 years old, but he was a fisherman. He was born with a fishing pole in his hand. And I used to tell him, someday you're going to be a fisher of men, meaning you're going to preach. And he goes, no, no, I'm going to be a fisherman. And I said, okay, we'll see. So the daughter Kimberly wanted a horse. So I buy her a horse. And every Saturday I would bring all 5 kids out to the ranch. Rocky would put the bass boat in the lake. There was a big lake in the middle. And then the girls would be riding, Kimberly would be riding the horses. Next thing, my other daughter, Sherry, well, that's not fair. You got Kimberly a horse and I don't have a horse. I said, Sherry, you don't even like horses. Well, I want a horse. So I go get a second horse. And let me tell you, if you don't know about horses, their feed and their shoes cost more than my food and my shoes. Okay. And so there was the second horse. Then Rocky being spoiled by his mother. That's not fair, Mom. You got Sherry a horse and you got Kimberly a horse and I don't have a horse. I said, Rocky, you have a $25,000 bass boat in that lake there. I want a horse. Okay. I buy Rocky a horse. So now we have 3 horses, and I'm working 6 days a week to support 5 kids, a mother, and now 3 horses, and rent the big ranch in Parkland. So next thing you know, Sherry loses interest. One ride with the horse, she don't want to ride horses anymore. So Kimberly winds up taking care of two horses in the barn. And then Rocky, he did ride. He rode quite a bit. But then he loses interest in the horse. And then Kimberly's got 3 horses to take care of. And meanwhile, Mom is paying the bills. But that's another warning to single moms. You feel guilty because there's no father in the picture, and you overcompensate. And I'm guilty of that, overcompensating, not from the other 4 kids, but for Rocky, a $25,000 bass boat. On top of that, he wants a horse. Yep. And I did it. So he grew up with the spirit of entitlement. Like, my name is Rocky, and I'm my mom's favorite, and I'm the baby, and I'm entitled to this. That's my fault. Guilty. You can't do that, mothers, single mothers. No, because you create monsters. And that's what I did. And so I just wanted to mention that. Go ahead, Rita.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And he's even mentioned, well, when we were together, mentioned like I'm used to being pampered, So he was probably, Shannon was probably the most self-aware person I knew because he knew all these things about himself. Because most people can be in denial about some of their flaws, or they don't see them, or they rationalize them away. Now, what was always, remarkable to me is that he never did like when we had real conversations, when, he had moments of like just I'm going to say real conversations because other conversations could be fueled with like, him acting out episodes of bipolar or whatever, but moments when he was clear, he was like I would like bring up some of the stuff that he had or what he would do or like self-sabotage amongst and many other traits that was negative, and he admitted it. He would always admit it. He knew totally exactly his downsides. um I would always like sometimes like have these like preaching sermons to him to try to like motivate him to kind of like you know, empower himself and just kind of get out of it. And he would sit and listen sometimes and, and after, and just kind of, he would be amused by it, like, oh, look at her, look how much energy and effort she's putting in. And, he was just really stuck on being in this river of like, uh, I don't know, I'm going to call it victimhood or, just, yeah, like a stagnant, like being stagnant. Um, and I would be looking in and I'd be like, oh my God, you're so intelligent, you're so socially intelligent, you're charismatic, you're sh very sharp. You have the power and ability to really empower people. I mean, I always really just saw him act, to tell you, like to be, he would have been a very powerful, personal development leader. Like that's how I kind of saw him, especially when I first met him. And so and so I just and he would always kind of get mad in the beginning when I would say that to him. We were first dating. And but yeah, but secretly, when Shannon would always go back into the job market or whatever, because there's times when we're living together and I either grab his computer and for whatever reason, I mean I had to do something or something and I would see, the old browser history and I would see he was looking for like helping other people get out of drugs. So like drug addiction counseling positions and stuff like that. So he was looking into those things. He never mentioned it to me, but I did see it. And for some reason, I don't know why I never brought it to his attention. Like, hey, I saw that, you're, you know, um, looking into getting into that profession. But I think a part of him did, but then for some reason, another part of him never, never really fulfilled roles where he could help other people, but he really, it's unfortunate, but I really saw him as somebody who had the ability to really, truly help people. He was very powerful in that way. And it's unfortunate and it's a shame because there's other people that are out there who do that and they're not as effective, because they're not connected to their authenticity like Shannon was. Like Shannon was really connected and tuned in to um like something real. He was just really tuned and he was, he was just so good with like, on one-on-ones and in terms of like capturing, really seeing a person, really hearing a person. That's something that he's probably cultivated throughout his sales career because that's a part of being a good salesperson. So his natural innate coaching ability, actually, I could play a clip for the audience right now, of Shannon coaching me on picking up a cat. Okay, so let's give you context. I have a horrific PTSD with cats because of my childhood experiences with a cat growing up that was, abusive and terrorizing. My sister, when she was little, she abused our cat in the home, and it became vicious as it grew up, and like it would just jump on and claw on you and did it. And so I have this PTSD with cats, and in the beginning stages when me and Shannon were dating, I just turned 30, and that's when we started dating, and um, there was a stray cat that he had seen, and he picked it up. It was a stray cat, and he put it into our condo, and um, he immediately saw that I was scared of it by my behavior. So Shannon being Shannon, he started trying to get me to pet the cat and trying to like ultimately pick up the cat. And I did pick up the cat ultimately. But back in those days, we didn't have the smartphones that we do today. So we were recording. He had my camera, an actual camera, because back then we used to carry cameras and it ran out of memory. So it didn't actually pick up the footage of me actually carrying the cat, but you could see Shannon walking me, talking me through the process of scared, petrified Rita to finally get me to pick up the cat. So I'll play that clip for the audience now, just to kind of showcase, um, all one of the talents that he had amongst many that he just um, didn't fulfill. He just would self-sabotage, and he would put himself into states of chaos. And I would say, like, kind of, he was like addicted to chaos, and perhaps maybe the thrill of getting out of the chaos and putting himself into chaos again to see the challenge of that. Um, Let me look for the clip. Okay, there it is, the clip. Shannon getting scared Rita to pick up a cat. Now, I don't know if the audience can hear. Maria, can you hear this? I don't think you can hear this.
No.
Okay, so let me unmic this, and hopefully it's not going to. Oh, I think I have an idea. I'm going to have to go into. Thank God I have two computers. So I'm going to have to use my other computer to play the clip.
Before you do that, can I make two comments?
Of course.
Shannon's always told me his biggest disappointment was in life was the fact that when he lost his stockbroker license, that I would be so disappointed in him because I was so happy that he was on his way to manhood and he had a stockbroker job and becoming independent. And I was so proud of him. And of course, I bragged to all my church people and my family and all my son's a stockbroker. Not only did he pass the stockbroker's test for Florida, but he took the stockbroker's test for the entire United States. And he would fly to all these different families in the country that he would sell stock to, and they would invite him to fly out to their homes to pick up the checks. But the first time he took that major test for the entire United States, he passed that one also in flying colors. And like Rita was saying, the Bible says, physician, heal thyself. Rocky was trying to get her to like cats and see that cats are really neat pets, but he couldn't heal himself. And the Bible does say, physician, heal thyself. You got to be healed first before you can heal anybody else. And my son's death of fentanyl, accidental, the death certificate and the medical exam, accidental fentanyl, does affect families from the poorest of the poor to the richest of the rich. It has no boundaries. So many families were all in the same boat, regardless of color, race, creed, or anything. We're all in the same boat. So that's what I wanted to say.
Yes, absolutely. It doesn't matter what class, it affects everybody equally. Um, and you just have to see with me when I was going through my thing with Shannon, whenever he would have episodes, I would never take it personally. So that actually what's helped our relationship a lot. But ultimately, I mean, it still didn't help enough. So I would, whenever he have an episode and say like he freaked out about something, like I remember I got chicken thighs and he wanted chicken breasts, and I know it would turn into this whole ordeal of like, oh, you didn't look, or whatever. I don't have to get into it. Everybody kind of gets the gist of it, where they just started just going off the rocker and hold on, let me just give my son his bottle again, I guess. And so um I would not get angry back at him. I wouldn't fuel the fire, but and then he would go and find out. and he would calm down. So that was a major. Maria?
You're cutting out, honey.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So that was a major moment of like, okay, Nicholas, okay. All right. Okay. All right. Okay. So, okay. So that was a major moment of a way of dealing with his episodes is to not take it personally, to just let them go through it and get angry or whatever they do when they're saying something so ridiculous because they're being triggered. And then eventually they just kind of get out of it and calm down. So um that was a major like help and but still wasn't enough because ultimately there was still a strain after going through with time you just finally hit your threshold of pain and you kind of like you just get exhausted and burnt out. And, you realize this is never going to end. Like this is going to be a reoccurring cycle over, you're going to have moments of happiness, moments of joy, moments of love, like doting on it. And then you're going to have moments of complete, utter chaos. And then you start to anticipate the chaos coming after the happy moments. It's like this reoccurring cycle over and over and over again. It's never a sustaining, peaceful, cohesive um relationship dynamic. It's just this just constant, you know, upheavals sprinkled in with moments of joy and love. And I will say this, like I think this, I think a lot of the moments of joy and love and fun with him, they were epic. And I think that was why, probably his exes as well, probably was so difficult to walk away from him. And other people would comment thinking, without meeting him, how crazy I was to stay in a relationship like this. And I remember one friend in particular. And Shannon, I said, okay, she invited us to dinner or whatever. So we went to her house for a dinner party. And that was her first time meeting him in person. And then she said, "Oh, I get it. I get why you stayed with him for all these years. I get it." And you put up with, because she knew how he looked, but I mean, looks are looks. I mean, some people can be really good looking, and the minute they open up their mouth, their personality is not as appealing, right? And then they become unattractive. And it was his personality, he was so charming. And she even, one of the first things she said is like, "Oh, you remind me of Tony Robbins." And so you don't really understand until really you've been there yourself, in terms of being in a relationship like this with somebody that has um, a mental health challenge like this. And you feel for them because you see their light side. It's really, really painful to watch them like this. I would see moments of him in bed and I'm just, it's just like, and then and their light side, and it's like it's just so. I remember just like trying to make sense of it, and it's just really tragic. Um,
Can I
so
comment on that, Rita, please?
yes, sure.
Okay. When Rocky lost his stockbroker's license, that was the end of Rocky. The son I knew, the life that Rocky led, that was the end of Rocky. He lost his identity. Many, many people who lose their dream jobs due to one reason or another can't pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and keep on trucking. They can't because that was their identity. I'm Rocky, and I'm a successful stockbroker. He never got over that. And every one of these beautiful young women that were his girlfriends, who they loved him to the moon and back, um, he he had a inferiority complex, and he felt that. And these were successful women. These weren't just any old woman. They were four successful women who had a life and money and everything. And he always felt inferior, that no matter what he did, he wouldn't be good enough for them. So instead of them rejecting him first, he would reject them and move on. And it was the same old pattern over and over and over again. He couldn't help himself. And on this earth, you're either serving Satan or Jesus. And when you're in the state and frame of mind under the influence, Satan runs your life and controls your life. So he kept Rocky under his thumb and made sure that Rocky didn't have whatever it took to get up and keep going, because he never felt that it would happen again. He lost his way, he lost his identity, and finally he lost his life. Go ahead, Rita.
Yeah, so I'm going to play a clip of Shannon coaching me to pick up a cat and making me go through the process of, baby steps. So I'll play the clip now. Okay.
Rita, just reach over and pet him. Rita. I can't. Rita, he's right next to you. Rita, he's right next to you. Go, reach over. Look at you. Reach over. Just pet him. Rita, please, for me. For me. For me. I'm asking you, please. Yeah. Just reach over and pet him one time. Just one time. You just got that. Like I'm fucking empty.
So I am petting the cat in the video clip.
Pull him out. They get a picture.
Yeah.
Pull him out. Please.
We're done for me, okay?
Rita, just reach there and grab him. Okay, then what's wrong with this one? He does real vicious. Pull him out.
So to give people context, I am petting the cat in this moment. So you got me to pet the cat.
Wow, I can hear it.
Yeah, so I was petting the cat, and the memory of the camera ran out of memory, but he got me to pick up the cat. So that was pretty spectacular, considering like anyone who knows me knows how much of a fear I have of cats, to be able to like touch them or them to sit on me or whatever. So yeah, so that's just to give you like how good he was when dealing with people in terms of walking them through something and not being annoying about it and knowing how to get them to do like little baby steps one at a time and talk it through that with empathy. And he's pausing at moments to kind of let me, process what's going on or how ridiculous I'm being without accusing me of being ridiculous, but either using words of encouragement or asking questions to kind of motivate you into little moments of action. So he was really good at that. He knew how to like inspire people to act um, based on where they were at and their personality because he was really good with observing people.
Well,
So,
Rocky was a lover, excuse me, Rocky was a lover of animals. My kids grew up with animals. I grew up with animals. Well, I should say a rabbit, horses, and a dog. And so, having my kids, I wanted them to love animals and learn how to have responsibility and take care of animals, which is why I had the 3 horses. But in our homes, we had birds, fish tank, cats, dogs, not all together at one time, cats and dogs. And he had a heart for animals, and he was very gentle with them, and he loved animals. And I'll never forget one day, my doorbell rings, and he was out riding his bike. I opened up my front door, and Rocky's standing there. And I said, Rocky, why did you ring the bell? The door is unlocked. And I'm looking, and it looked like he had a beaded necklace around his neck. And I'm thinking, I don't remember him having a beaded necklace. He wasn't that kind of kid. All of a sudden, it started moving, and it was a long, skinny snake around his neck. And I started screaming, and he started laughing and running away. So he had no fear of anything. He went deep sea fishing. He wanted to go diving in Australia's with the great whites, and he would go using bait to get alligators, and he would go hunting in the Everglades for wild boar and bobcats and all those creatures in the Everglades. He had his fishing license and his license to hunt. He had no fear of anything. That was the wild side of him with animals. But the other side, we always had cats, like I said, cats and dogs and birds and fish. And then, of course, at the ranch, we had our horses. And every serial killer in the history of America abused animals as kids. That's a warning. Abused animals as kids, and then they grew up and killed humans. Every serial killer in the United States has been proven about the abuse of animals. Go ahead, Rita.
Yeah. So, and like Maria mentioned earlier, that mental illness, it doesn't affect a certain, social class or a particular group of people. And even in the case of Shannon, like it doesn't, it doesn't matter if you're like really good looking or really smart or, it doesn't matter. It can target anybody, anybody can have mental illness. And and with me, I never really experienced anybody that was close with me, before Shannon, or I don't even really after Shannon, in terms of, watching somebody that smart and talented and literally having the world at your fingertips, because that's how talented and intelligent he was, to be literally trapped in by mental illness, because it really was trapping him, because, meaning declining opportunities, not really sharing his gifts with the world. Um, so he was like in a mental prison, and just recreating chaos after chaos, and with moments of like, you know, happiness and stuff like that. But then most of it was just creating chaos again. It was just really sad to watch. And and me trying to make sense of it, and like trying to like find mental tools and techniques to try to snap him out of it. But he just, I don't know, it's like he surrendered to it, is the best way I could describe it. It was like he just surrendered to it.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah.
This is raw. This is the real deal. You're hearing the real story. My son was not a saint. My son was not an angel. He was a human being who lost his way and got away from God And when you get away from God, you're out there on your own. You have no more covering when you leave God out of the equation. And so he was open and susceptible to anything that Satan threw at him. And when you're under the influence of drugs, that's when it's worse, because Satan tries to tell you to kill yourself. And so he did have suicidal thoughts at one time, and he couldn't help it. And no woman on this earth, I don't care who it is, could change him. Only God. But at the last moments of his life, he did turn to God. And I forgot to mention this before. And when I questioned God, and God showed me that he was in the shower and gave his heart to God and made the deal with God and asked God to forgive him. And then 2 days later, he's found dead in bed. I said to God, I don't understand that. He recommitted. He was a backslidden Christian. He recommitted. I don't understand it. And this is what God said to me. He said, when people die young and they're saved, whether they recommit themselves at that time or not, he said, I take them because I see what's going to happen down the line. And they're going to lose their faith in God. They're going to go back to the whatever was familiar with them. And I don't want to see any of my people die and go to hell. So God made me understand why at that perfect time he took my son, because he asked for forgiveness. He told the Lord he wanted to be in heaven with Jesus, and God took him because God knew that in the very near future, no matter what he did in that shower that night, in the future he would backslide and live for Satan again, and God did not want that to happen to my son. So he took him while he was saved. That's very, very important to remember.
Yes, it
Because
is.
I always question God. My God, like Charlie Kirk, he's out there working for you, God, and you took him. I don't understand this. He was in the college campuses. Kids were getting saved left and right. I don't know what happened. But God showed me, and I won't mention their names, 2 people that he was involved in who weren't the real deal, and they were going to lead him down the wrong path, and he would have lost his salvation. So God took him ahead of time, so that didn't happen. So you have to understand, the God we serve, Father God and Jesus, that they have mercy and compassion on every one of us. And that's why Jesus is called the Alpha and the Omega. He knows the end from the beginning and the beginning from the end. So I have great peace about it. I go on with my life knowing that my son's pain that he was in the misery he was in on this earth, that he couldn't get out by himself. He couldn't. That it's finally, his battle is over. Because remember this, when we're born, God sends our guardian angel into the delivery room or the bathtub or the hotel room or the house, wherever you have a baby. God sends the angel in there with the book of life, and it's open. And he puts our babies' names in that book, the exact second, minute, and hour we're born, and the date. And there's a big dash. And the angel of God puts the death date on the other side, which we don't know. And once that time is up, that's it. There's nothing you can do. So I thank God that he's given me peace about this, that I could go on with my life and fight battles every day between good and evil and minister to young ladies the word of God and be used by God as an evangelist. I thank God every day for that, only because I have peace where my son is. It's over for him, but God brought him back home to eternity, to heaven. And any one of us, no matter what we've been through, once we ask God to forgive us of our sins, God forgives us and he throws our sins into the lake of fire. And once we were red as scarlet, now we're white as snow. And it's just a 2-sentence thing that we have to say, Father God, this is how you pray to Father God in the name of Jesus. And when you use the word Jesus, it gets Father's attention. Please forgive me of all my sins, past, present, and future, from the second I was born to now, and all the sins I may commit in the future. And when I die, I want to spend eternity in heaven with you, Father God, and with Jesus, and with all my family members. In Jesus' name, amen. That's it. That is your ticket to heaven. Because when we stand before God, he's only going to ask us 2 questions. Not what a good person we were, how much we volunteered, how we did this, how we did that. That doesn't matter to the Father. What matters is, what did you do with my son? Did you accept him or did you reject him? This is very scary. And if you can't lie to God. So if you rejected him, you say, I rejected him. God the Father, the creator of the universe, who created you and knew you from your mother's womb, will turn his back and say, I never knew you. And immediately you're plunged into hell. Fire, brimstone, smoke, and the angels that were assigned to you when you were born, your guardian angels, the demons, that were assigned to you when you were born are the same demons that follow you into hell. And they're your biggest tormentors because they torment you. Why did you listen? Why did you listen? Because you didn't listen to God. Now we're down here with you. And they torment you for all eternity. However, the second question God the Father asks is, what did you do with my son? Did you accept him or did you reject him? And if you say, I accepted him, Father, he says, job well done, my good and faithful servant. Enter in to the kingdom of God to your glory. In the big pearly gates open and the angels escort you to your mansion. Does it get any better than that? No, because what people have to realize, we're on this earth a certain time. And in the blink of an eye, the minute our spirit leaves our body, we're dead. Because your body can't live without your spirit. So the minute God calls your spirit out, you're dead. And you have to be prepared. Like the Bible says, be prepared in season and out of season. So I hope that everybody that listens realizes I'm not glorifying Rocky like he is a saint. No, he was far from it, but he was human with all the frailties of being a human. And he did not have the capabilities of pulling himself up out of the muck and mire and finishing his race on this earth. He couldn't. And no female on this earth could, as much as they tried and they helped, they could not do it. Only God. That's it, Rita.
Yeah. Yep. That is essentially the Battle of Shannon and aka Rocky. And yeah, and we touched on many points and, Maria's journey as a mother with Shannon battling mental illness and my journey with him as his girlfriend slash fiance. We had plans for marriage, but then, of course, he picked a fight. He picked a fight where he knew my values and belief systems was not going to allow me to um back down. And so he did it in a way where he challenged me, tested me, and created tension to the point of like not willing to compromise, or yeah, no com so we eventually broke it off, and then but we maintained in contact, um, because he was playing out his frustrations with me by trying to punish me for not giving in to whatever demands your whatever his viewpoints were, and then just basically playing kind of like a game, but yet at the same time still loving each other. It was just a weird dynamic looking back in hindsight, and it's just such a tragic way to live, really. Because he was still very much attached to me. And obviously, I still loved him and very much attached to him, but I wasn't willing to back down either. And looking back in hindsight, I mean, you could say it was also my fears as well being represented, like the fact that we were now going to be, um, it was going to be like a real thing and like actually committed, marriage and like getting a house, to all these things. Like it kind of scared me when it became a reality too, because the dynamic between him and I was I would get breaks from him by going over back to my home, and that was kind of a buffer to kind of really really to kind of like let me recharge before going back into the lion's den with him. And so and then when it became, 24/7, it was like, okay, well, it's a different dynamic now. I'm going to be with him 24/7, like, and the reality of dealing with his mental illness really started to kick in. Because prior to that, the idea of marriage and having a house, all these things, yeah, of course, it was fabulous, but it was an abstract thought that you can project all your desires into it, but then once it turns into reality, you start to realize and you start to see reality of like of the real of like is mental illness. I think as his girlfriend in the relationship, a lot of people we deny things as a way to cope and survive in our day-to-day lives, right? Because it's a defense mechanism to just not deal with the unflattering things in life. And so I didn't really dwell, I guess, so much on the reality of his mental illness to live with it every day, because the dynamic of a relationship allowed me to just go off into my own little world. Because we did have a long distance relationship, and so um, for the most part, and then with times of living with each other, and then it's just it's difficult, and so the reason why I can speak about this so without crying and stuff like this is because it's been 3 years, right? So this June would be 3 years. He passed June 9th, 2023. And so if we were to speak about this 2 years ago, or even or 3 years, I'd be bawling. I would not be speaking the way I am today in a clear, non-emotional manner. Because I've made peace with it. Because prior to reaching this point, I would have regret. I would like, oh, I should have like, stayed with him. If I did, he would still be alive. All these things, and I should have just like flown to Florida and all these things. A massive, massive regret. As soon as his death happened, and grieving, and so. I agreed for a long time. It was just it was really, really difficult. And I think the first thing that came out of my mouth when I first found out was no, no, no. And I remember actually recently, maybe a few months ago, I was watching an episode of this the show on Apple TV called The Morning Show with Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon and um the character, I forget, he's a famous actor, I forget his name. He's the guy who played in The Office. Anyways, who watch the show knows what I'm talking about. He is also a complicated, complex character, and he's loved by the public because he presents this charming and because they are TV personalities. And but behind the scenes, he's a very challenging, complicated, complex character, and so anyways, Jennifer Aniston, who's his co-worker, she was kind of like his work wife. He had a real life wife at home, but because they worked together so much and they had a bond. But she knew who he was as well. He wasn't exactly, he had a dark side to him. So he had both sides to him. And so, anyways, when he died, she basically, her first reaction was, no, 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 this can't be, So that was kind of like my reaction, no, 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 and kept saying no, no. So I really related to that character in that moment. Um, because I think suffering is like not wanting to accept truth. You're resisting it. You want to change it. And now that I'm at peace with it is because, I've accepted it. Um, he was suffering. Even if I did turn back the clock and went back down, it's still not going to, maybe he would still be here, but he would still be suffering. I mean, he still would go through his challenges and maybe he would still, eventually, succumb to the addiction of drugs, so it's just you just have to make peace with reality and accept it. That's the only way you're gonna have peace and harmony in life. You just can't keep resisting.
May I interject?
Yes.
That's exactly correct. However, the point is that the mental illness, not only coming from the father's side of the family with the grandmother, being admitted to mental institutions, God only knows how many times, 3 that I found out about, but the drugs triggers the mental illness. The drugs do that, and it exasperates the state of mind, because once those drugs get into your mind, it's Satan's tools. And so whatever was there but not manifesting itself becomes very prominent. And so I believe with all my heart, everything I've experienced with Rocky as his mom, that those drugs really brought on the bouts of mental illness. Because, there were days when he was like the greatest son you can want, kind and everything. And there were other days when he was out of control. So I
Yeah.
always knew when he was doing drugs. And when he was in a good place, he'd go fishing. I still have his boat here and his fishing gear, 25 poles. I don't know why you need 25 fishing poles and all his tackle box and everything in it. I still have it at my home. And when he was in a good place, he'd be out on the water fishing because he loved it. And when he was not in a good place, no, he wouldn't be fishing. And another thing, he saw all his fishing partners and friends were married and having children. So when he would call them up, let's go fishing, they couldn't just say, yeah, okay, because now they had wives and responsibility of a family. And Rocky couldn't understand that because he never could or would accept responsibility being a father. So he never did that. So I just wanted to explain that the drugs triggered the mental instability in his life. Besides the fact it was on his father's side. The father's mother and the father was a demon possessed mental case, the father. And I'll leave it at that. Go
Okay.
ahead, Rita.
Yeah, so yeah, we've touched on so many components of it, his challenges with mental health and also challenges with drug addiction. Um, and to be clear, like to the audience, he did have, near the end, he actually did win his war on drugs. Like he did stay sober for the most part near the end of his life. I noticed a difference in his behavior. I mean, it was just over the phone because him and I we were not romantically together. So, but we would still converse on the phone, and he was. I think after I had put a stop to the romantic relation, I just had enough. And him and I were like you could say psychically connected. We were spiritually like we would kind of have like almost at times telepathic ability. Because we were very connected. So he knew when I was serious. He always knew like when I was bluffing, when I would be serious, when I hit my point, even without me saying anything at times. It's kind of freaky sometimes. He really did at times. He was very intuitive to the point where it was spooky. So, and so he knew, and then that triggered him to get back into all of a sudden, I think maybe it was the anger towards me. Oh, I'm going to show her or whatever. I don't know. Definitely something gassed him up and sparked motivation and drive to get back into a sales position, and he did. And it was an industry where he never sold it before. It was a new industry for him, but and yet people were making comments like, "What are you doing?" Like they would like, and because he would tell me this, he's like, like my coworkers are asking me and emailing me like, "What is it that I'm doing to like, have higher numbers than them that they've been in this working this longer than me?" And I just jumped in and I said, "Oh, just take that as a compliment, just it's flattering and just whatever." And because it's a workplace situation. So I guess he just was trying to be cautious as to whatever conflictual dynamics that may have arisen as a result of that. And but yeah, so he was he was staying sober really for the most part and able to come to work regularly and get results. And the way he was conversing with me, it was he was much clearer and much longer conversations, real conversations, near I would say the last 2 years of his life. And so it was just unfortunate. It's just he was finally getting to a place of like, just kind of being responsible in small steps. And but yet still he still got taken over by so I say this, yes, he was sober for the most part, but from what was disclosed to me by his best friend was that somebody had seduced him, not, by drugs, by saying, "Oh, on the street, some stranger." And so he got tempted because like, "Oh yeah, it's free," or whatever stories they were saying to him. So, and then, him having that addiction, even though he was battling it and staying clean for the most part, still got tempted. And then that was his demise of life, was that in that moment of accepting the temptation by a stranger. So that's what happened. That's why he's no longer here with us. But, even though I think that was what was so tragic for me too, to kind of overcome the grief of his death, was because near the end he was actually finally making strides, which I have not even seen him do, to actually put in some real effort into making strides in like a very long time. So it's just that part was just really hard to kind of make peace with, because that was the sad part of it all. Um, after he had passed away. So it's just, you know, I'm having to make peace with that as well.
Okay, Rita.
All
I
right.
hope you invite me. Thank you for sharing all that. And I hope that you invite me back on your podcast, because this is my first time on a podcast, and I feel so honored and privileged. And I'll just make one more comment. Like you said, when he started working in a job where he had no experience, and he would beat butt of all the other experienced guys working there. My life was a salesperson, and that used to happen to me all the time. And that I would just have the gift of knowledge, which I believe that God gave Rocky, the gift of knowledge, because he knew things and didn't know he knew things. But also that my prayer every morning is, Father, let me find favor with you and favor with man. And Rocky would find favor with both. But because of his addiction, he couldn't maintain getting back on his feet and holding a job, because the pull of Satan with the drugs was more than he can handle. And you can't do both at once. You can't be successful and then be a drug addict at the same time. It's impossible. And like Rita said, some guy or a friend offered him a free drug, and the guy was waiting around the corner for him. Well, that was Satan. Satan sends his demons because he doesn't want you to get on the straight and narrow. He wants to keep you down so he can kill you and take you to hell. So that was Satan that presented him with the drug, and Rocky wasn't strong enough to resist and always wanted to escape from realism. And to do it is to take the drugs and pass out and then get up and start all over again. So it's a very sad commentary. And I hope whoever your listeners are, that they picked lessons to be learned up from a mother who lived through it and is still living. And the grace of God, I'm 83 years old. And my children range in age from 64 down to 52. And of course, Rocky's the one that would have been 52. So, and God is still keeping me alive and well and kicking and leading souls to Jesus on this earth. So every day I thank God when I open up my verticals in my living room and my home faces east and the sun is coming up, that beautiful Florida sun. And I say, this is the day the Lord has made. I shall rejoice and be glad in it. And so that's my prayer for everyone listening, that you can either, due to grief, you can either put a bullet in your brain or you keep on going till your race is finished. I chose to keep on going till my race is finished. And I will be reunited with my family and my golden child, Rocky. And he knows that his mom's going to be heading to heaven for a family reunion. And that's what I look forward to. But when God's ready to take me, may his perfect will be done in my life. And that's it. And I think I'm done for the day. Are you, Rita?
I am. Yes. It was an amazing conversation. It was raw and it was real. And I hope everyone got lessons from that. And so, Maria, definitely we'll have you back on the podcast. We'll talk about other topics. And it was great having you as a guest. Thank you for being on the show, Maria. And have a wonderful, wonderful day. And I will talk to you later. And everybody else, live happy, being well.
If you learned something new or were inspired to live happy being well, please be sure to subscribe to the Happy Being Well podcast so you don't miss an upcoming episode. Also, please feel free to leave a 5-star review, including what you learned or what inspired you in today's episode. This podcast is presented by happybeingwell.com, your online store for natural wellness products, so you can live happy being well. Order your next all-natural essential oil, all-natural face mask, all-natural bath soap, all-natural deodorant, herbal tea, crystals including crystal home decor and kitchen items, irresistible leggings, and much more at happybeingwell.com. Free shipping on all orders within the USA.